These are the quarterbacks that you have to be drafting in fantasy football. Kicking us off, my quarterback that you must be drafting that I'm going to have in every league. You guys probably saw this one coming. It is Justin Herbert, another Los Angeles Charger. My running back breakout was Omarion Hampton. Wide receiver breakout was Quentin Johnson. It's only right that the quarterback I'm drafting is Justin Herbert. He's being drafted currently as the quarterback 8, and I'm high on him. I have him as my quarterback 2. And I think that might be a stretch. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think you guys should value him as your quarterback, too. That is the shot that I am calling. And I may be wrong. But I do think quarterback 8 is good value for him. I think that's the point I want to make here. I have him statted out for about 4,350 yards, 35 touchdowns. And then he's a guy who saw 500 rushing yards last year. I have him at about 402 rushing touchdowns. I mean, this is a guy who we've seen him do the thing before, right? We've seen him be the quarterback 2 before. He had 5,000 passing yards in his second year. He had just over 3,700 last year with an offensive line that ranked 31st in pass blocking last year. Obviously, Rashawn Slater didn't play a single game. Joe Alt got hurt very early on into the year. Both those guys starting the season healthy. You hope they play a full 17. Made some improvements along the interior. And then you bring in Mike McDaniel, who is a wizard. I mean, he had this guy Tua Tagovailoa with the Dolphins playing like an MVP candidate in 2023, and in that time, before the wheels fell off, for reference, week 14 of 2023 was the infamous choke job against the Titans, which was not fun to watch. But during that time, weeks 1 to 13, McDaniel had Tua 4th in EPA per play and 4th in success rate amongst quarterbacks. I think they're going to be a dynamic pairing, right? Like, Tua is a guy who had his limitations. Didn't have the strongest arm. Obviously can't really scramble. You don't want him getting hurt, whereas Justin Herbert is literally the complete opposite. This is a 6'6" behemoth of a man, takes hits like no other. I mean, Josh Allen is, a guy who takes hits.
Definitely.
But he's in a tier of his own other than him, takes hits like no other, and has all the arm talent and arm strength in the world. And I think Mike McDaniel is salivating over this guy and what he could do with his offense. There's going to be a lot of pre-snap motion, a lot of getting guys going across the field. I think there's an opportunity for a lot of big chunk plays. I think the offense is going to be predicated on the run game, right? Similar to how it was in Miami with the dynamic duo of Mostert and Achane. Hampton, obviously, I think is going to eat, but I think Justin Herbert is going to have the easiest time playing quarterback of his NFL career, right? Again, this is a guy who's dealt with either injured O-line or no O-line. He's dealt with injuries to his receivers all the time. He's dealt with terrorists as play callers, right? I mean, going from Greg Roman to Mike McDaniel is just, it's like upgrading from, making a fire with rocks to a gas oven. Like, that's the upgrade we're getting here. We're with the times. We're rejuvenated. And I think Justin Herbert is in for the best year of his career. I mean, this is a guy who I think is going to win the MVP of the league, right? And I think the offense have the potential to be the best offense in football, and that's, again, bold take. I have him as my quarterback too. You don't have to be as bullish as him as I am. But this is an offense that realistically should be a top 5 offense in the sport. And I think you're wrong if you think otherwise. And then, there's a point about like quarterbacks and running backs and receivers in top 5 offenses have so much of a higher hit rate in fantasy football. I saw tweets about this. I don't know who put them out, and I don't have the numbers, but I think it's like 75+% of a quarterback in a top 5 offense to finish as a top 5 quarterback, top 10 quarterback. And I think it's like 40-ish% to finish as a top 5 quarterback. So, if this is a top 5 offense, the odds are in his favor to outperform ADP.
I could not agree more. Justin Herbert, last year especially, showed that there's a whole nother upside to him with his rushing ability too. And some of it was by necessity. Obviously, his 2 tackles being all kinds of banged up, not playing. I think playing a combined 4 games last season. Just, the guy is just a freak of nature. And you made a comparison of, for me, it's going from a Toyota Camry in Greg Roman to where it's like, reliable to, holy shit, I have a Lambo in my garage now. Because it's like Mike McDaniel's that shiny new toy. There's a lot of stuff that he does that he didn't get the chance to do with Tua because he wasn't capable of doing with Tua. So now it's like you said, he's salivating at the opportunity to, holy shit, I could send Lad 80 yards down the field and this guy could still hit him on the money. So I think Justin Herbert, honestly, probably will end up like 4,400 rushing, passing yards, and then probably around 400 rushing yards. And it's like, you're getting that from a guy. I promise you, he's easily top 3 quarterback. So.
I think there's a world where, I think we both have him around a similar range in terms of the rushing yards, 400 to 450. I think there's a world where we're overshooting that
100%.
because it was so high last year because of the offensive line struggles, the inability to run the ball. He was scrambling for his life out there.
Yes.
I think that was a big part of the 500-yard threshold that he got to, but I mean, still with that, right? Like, we saw Matthew Stafford be top 5 fantasy quarterback last year with no rushing.
We could definitely be undershooting his passing yards.
That's kind of where I'm at. I look
Tua
at
led
it.
the league.
Yeah, I know. I look at it and I'm like, I think I'm undershooting it. Like, 40. Don't get me wrong, 43, 50, and 35. Like, that's a great season. But again, I'm saying this is the MVP of the league. I think it's going to be more. Like, this should be a guy who should hit 4,500 and 40.
Push
honestly.
for 5. He's hit 5 in his career.
Right.
He could push for 5 in a more efficient offense.
Right.
So.
And I said they're going to be predicated on the run game. Obviously, I'm very bullish on Omari and Hampton. I think the two could work hand in hand,
100%.
right? Like we saw, again, the Rams that I'm referencing last year, Matthew Stafford, MVP level quarterback, top 5 fantasy quarterback. We saw the Rams have one of the best rushing attacks in football last year. Kyron be very fantasy relevant until Blake Corum came and, took carries from him, but that's a whole other can of worms. But point being, the best offenses in football are able to run the ball and pass the ball, and it doesn't really hurt each other. So, yeah, I mean, I'm drafting him everywhere I can. And again, QB2 might be too bullish, but QB8 I feel like is too low, and I think there's great value there, right? Like, Joe Burrow is an incredible quarterback. He's an incredible quarterback. I'd much rather draft Justin Herbert. What is that?
2.5 rounds.
Yeah, 3 rounds later. Like, I'd much rather draft Herbert much later.
I'm super ridiculously high on Joe Burrow, and I still feel the same way. I would rather have Justin Herbert 2.5 whole-ass rounds later than I would Joe Burrow. The value is just ridiculous. And even if he falls somewhere in the middle of where you think he is in ADP, QB5 is a ridiculous season and a major return on investment. So I will start this thing off by saying a quarterback that I am absolutely going to be targeting in my fantasy drafts is Jalen Hurts. And the reason I say that, he's currently listed as the QB6. And this doesn't make much sense to me, to be quite honest, because the lowest that Jalen Hurts has finished in his years of starting is QB8. And just for semantics, if Jalen Hurts were to play a full 17 like the guys above him did, he would have finished as the QB6 in each of the last 2 years. The guys had no fewer than 8 rushing touchdowns in any of the last 5 years of his career, that being last year. And let's talk a little bit about last year. Last year was an absolute mess for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he still had a very productive fantasy football season. There were problems all over the place. A.J. Brown's complaining about the ball. We had a terrorist offensive coordinator in Kevin Patullo. And now we get to see a Jalen Hurts in a much better situation with an offensive coordinator that I believe will work out for them in Sean Mannion. And on top of that, history just suggests that the Eagles every other year find an elite offensive coordinator that ends up getting a head coaching job, and then we just repeat this cycle. So this is one of those years where I do believe it's all going to work out and come together for Jalen Hurts. We've already seen that the guy has been a top 3 quarterback in fantasy football, has been the best quarterback in fantasy football, and not to mention the weapons in the passing game are just stacked from top to bottom now. If Devontae Smith is healthy, obviously that whole, I believe it was a hamstring strain or quad strain, that's an issue. Scared of that for sure. But if he is healthy, you got him. You have Mekhi Lemon, who was a top draft pick this year. You have Dontavion Wicks, Dallas Goedert, who's been a model of consistency there, and then Eli Stowers. So you just have weapons all over the place for Jalen Hurts. So I expect a big-time bounce back, and the best thing about Hurts is when his back is up against the wall, there's nobody I think I'd rather bet on at points than Jalen Hurts to come through.
I absolutely love everything you said. I love the value in Jalen Hurts. Like, quarterback 6 feels like a good spot for him, given he's a guy who can finish as the quarterback 1 overall, right?
Yes.
There's not many guys who can. There's a short list of guys who can, and he is one of them. Obviously, the rushing upside in terms of the rushing touchdowns he brings to the table. It was down last year, but also the Eagles as a team weren't as successful on the tush push, which just seems like one of those things where I'm going to lean on the side of I expect positive regression
100%.
there rather than the NFL figured it out. I kind of think chalk it up as they just got unlucky
Also,
on some of them.
offensive line was literally ravaged by
Ravaged,
injuries.
yes.
So
Very banged up. It's a new offense. I believe in Sean Mannion. I also think it being a new offense and Jalen Hurts having to pick up some new things can actually be in his favor early on as he's figuring things out, not seeing the field the way he should. Opportunities for him to run for his life, right? So I think that actually plays into his favor early on in the season. And you mentioned all the weapons they have, right? Like, yes, you lose A.J. Brown. That is a big blow to any team. This is top 10 receiver in the game at his floor. They're still loaded everywhere.
100%.
They're still loaded everywhere. So, and then the last point I'll make on Hurts is, you know, we've done a couple drafts for you guys that you guys have seen. I'm sure we've done a couple drafts on our own. Real life example, we drafted Jalen Hurts at the 8-12.
Yes.
At the 8-12. So, like, this is a guy who we've seen with our own two eyes that you guys, I don't know if that was the 1-1 video or the
That
1-1.
was, if we took him at 8-12, correct? So the 1-1.
Oh, yeah, that was the 1-1 video. So that was yesterday's video. Go check that out if you haven't already. How to draft from the 1-1
Good
perfect
Lord.
strategy. We took Jalen Hurts at the 8-12.
With real people in the draft,
With real
by the way.
people in the draft. This is a real world experience. So, like, Jalen Hurts, pretty solid value at where he's going in terms of ADP. If it's a trend that people don't want to draft Jalen Hurts and he falls to you, even better.
Yes.
Even better. Sign me up for Jalen Hurts at the 8-12 every single time.
I would feel comfortable drafting him at the start of the 7th. Very comfortable drafting him at the start of the 7th. You mean to tell me I could get him at the back end of the 8th in a draft? If you are passing on him in the 8th round, I'm sorry, you are ridiculous because there are very few that have that kind of upside in my personal opinion. But yeah, no, I'm also, you just mentioned it, the opportunity for more rushing. Last year was actually the lowest of his career in terms of rushing attempts of his starting season. So I feel like it's going to be a regression to the mean in a good way. So positive regression for Jalen Hurts this upcoming season in a lot of ways.
Really just a dumpster fire of a season across the board.
And he was
for
still
the
QB8.
Eagles. Like you know, does the consensus believe in Sean Mannion maybe the way you and I do? That doesn't really matter.
No.
Like, there's just no way it's that bad for the Eagles again,
Yes.
which will play into Jalen Hurts' favor. So, I think he's an incredible pick. I'd be very happy with Jalen Hurts as my quarterback. Another quarterback who I'd be very happy with drafting is Trevor Lawrence, who's currently going on Sleeper as the quarterback 10. I have him as my quarterback 6. I mean, the biggest thing with Trevor Lawrence, it's, you know, I'm very repetitive because I think that's a good way to be in fantasy football. If you believe in an offense and a team, you draft the players from that offense and that team. Talked about Parker Washington and his, rise to stardom.
Ascension,
Rise to stardom, we'll say, over the last half of last season. It was the same for Trevor Lawrence. Weeks 10 to 18 last year, he was the quarterback 1 in fantasy in terms of points per game, 23.4. During that stretch, he was top 4 in EPA per play, top 4 in success rate. This is a guy who's went over 4,000 yards 3 times in his 5 seasons as a starter. Yes, he had 9 rushing touchdowns. I do expect that to regress a little bit, but I do think something that plays in his favor, I expect the running game to be a little bit worse. Yeah, Liam Cohen's a run game whisperer, but the difference between a Travis Etienne and a Liam Cohen isn't running the ball, and
it'd be a big difference.
And a Baishal Tootin is noticeable.
Yes.
So I expect there to be more passing attempts for Trevor Lawrence and his passing numbers to be up. I have him at 41, 33, and 13 with 308 and 6 on the ground.
Okay.
So yeah,
33 tuds.
We're around the same spot. You have him at 30.
Yeah.
You actually have him for more yards, but
43, right? Ish.
Yeah, 43-ish. So, yeah, I mean, I think this guy, he's just a guy I feel like he's a great pick. Like,
I agree. He is.
I just really don't have much else to say. I mean, he finished as the quarterback 4 overall last year, going as the quarterback 10. Like, I feel good pressing the button on him. I feel great pressing the button on him, honestly. Like, again, a guy like Jackson Dart, who I'm going to talk about in the video on Thursday, I'm passing on Jackson Dart and waiting for Trevor Lawrence to make it back to me 100% of the time.
Yeah, I don't share the same sentiment there. I do share the sentiment of, like, even just the round difference makes a big difference in fantasy football. And I feel like that whole round between Jackson Dart and Trevor Lawrence is an important round for me to hit on somebody at a different position. to where, like, I'm comfortable taking Trevor Lawrence at the back end of the 9th round and maybe passing on a Jackson Dart at the start or middle of the 8th round. So I don't think they're too different in terms of where I would have them. So I definitely understand. And I think Trevor Lawrence is set for a massive year. Year 2 of the Liam Cohen system. And it's just like, another thing is those wide receivers all just complement each other so well. Like, none of them are necessarily ones. We will see with Parker Washington. But Brian Thomas just stretching the field. Jacoby Myers can work the underneath. And you just put the ball in Parker Washington's hands and let him work.
Yeah.
Like, they got something special going on over there for sure. And then Travis Hunter might just be the best wide receiver in football.
Something like that, yeah.
If he plays.
It's also a defense that took a setback, right? You lose an all-pro linebacker in Devin Lloyd. So, again, same thing as I mentioned with the run game, like, should potentially be more passing opportunities for Trev. And, I mean, just forget about fantasy football for a second. Like, this was a guy who was the best quarterback in the NFL for the second half of last year.
Very much
rivaled the 2 MVP leaders in Matt Stafford and Drake May for the second half of the year. Like, this is a guy who's that good. He should, if he maintains that level, which I expect him to, he should outperform his QB9 ADP.
This is the Trevor Lawrence we've all been waiting for.
Right.
So if that sticks, then we have the chosen one, the guy that was supposed to be here all along. So I will close this out with my final quarterback that I would absolutely love to draft. And he's actually basically not even being drafted. I did want to pick a deep sleeper here, at least one. And the guy that I'm going to go with is Baker Mayfield. He's getting drafted at the back end of the 14th, early 15th, essentially. And just needed to say that last year, before the injury, a lot of injuries actually, Baker had a fucking laundry list, excuse my language, of injuries this past year. He averaged 21 points per game. He was one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football, and he was on pace. If you guys remember, he was in the MVP conversation. This guy was that damn good. So he ran for close to 400 yards in each of the last 2 seasons. So Baker Mayfield is starting to be a scrambling quarterback. And while, yes, I understand they lost Mike Evans last year, they didn't really have Mike Evans in the first place healthy for much of last year. Emeka was also banged up. All of his weapons were injured, essentially. There was nothing going right for Tampa Bay. So after those first 6 weeks, what did he do? He averaged a little bit under 15 points per game in fantasy football. That ain't going to get it done. But there's a lot playing in Baker Mayfield's favor this year. In the regards of, I just said that I wouldn't bet on anybody over Jalen Hurts. I think that I may have a different one. Because when Baker Mayfield's back is up against the wall, I'm not sure there are many guys that could do better than he does either. So, not to mention, he was the QB4 the year prior to that, threw for 41 touchdowns, which was just an absolutely ridiculous season. And then the year prior to that, he was the QB10. He's going as the QB19. If Baker's going to play a full season, especially with a contract on the line, I'm assuming this guy's floor is probably going to be a QB1. And if you're getting that in the 15th round, there's very few values that are better than that.
If I am going to wait on quarterback, I'm going to wait on quarterback, and Baker Mayfield is the guy for me. You mentioned 2024. You called him the QB4. Let's call him what he was. He was the QB3, tied exactly with Joe Burrow in terms of total points and points per game, obviously, because they both played the full season. 22.5 points per game, tied with Joe Burrow, who was an MVP candidate. People were calling for him to win the MVP.
Yes, they were.
Had the Triple Crown winner on his team, one of the best offenses in the sport. Baker Mayfield was on par with that. This is a guy who, like you mentioned, first 6 weeks of last season was on an absolute tear, leading the MVP charge. He's going to throw the ball a ton. They're going to be an inefficient rushing attack with Bucky Irving back there, who wasn't great last year, dealt with injuries all summer. We'll see how he comes back. The defense is terrible. They're going to need him to throw the ball a lot. You have a year 2 receiver who's an absolute stud in Emeka Egbuka, who we might talk about in 2 weeks. I think he's going to come up at some point in one of these videos, who I'm very, very high on, if I didn't allude to that enough there. I think he's a home run pick at the end of your draft. I think he's a home run. Like, again, it's not a guy who you need to go out of your way to draft. Like, you take him with one of your last 2 or 3 picks. And he should outperform QB19. Like, the concern is injuries, but at that point in the draft, who cares? Like, if he gets hurt, you pick someone else up and hope they're good. That's a bet I'll take.
100% I agree. And I'm also very high on the idea of, if you really are going to wait that long to take one of those positions, the one positions, whether it's quarterback or tight end, I'm very high on the idea of taking 2 and hopefully one of them working out. So at the end of my drafts, like I'm not opposed to taking a Baker Mayfield and a Kyler Murray back-to-back closing my drafts and saying one of these guys is going to hit. Don't know which one, but it will happen.
Yeah.
And then you have a QB1 for the rest of the season.
Why do you think his ADP is so low? Injury concerns?
The injury, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's like
QB19 feels kind of egregious for him.
so ridiculously low. Like, no disrespect to some of the guys above him, but it's like Malik Willis, Jordan Love, even pocket passers and Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford. Granted, I understand that both of them have been so goddamn good, but it's like when Baker's healthy, he's also giving you a little bit of that rushing upside while throwing for a bunch of touchdowns. So it's like the last we've seen of Baker Mayfield that's been healthy, the guy was a stud in fantasy. So it's difficult for me to even understand why he's that low. And I guess the loss of Mike Evans also may play a factor in that a little bit, but
I mean, you also had a coordinator in Zach Robinson, who I absolutely love.
Yes.
I thought he did a good job in Atlanta
So
for
much you could do.
the cards he was dealt. And then, he was alongside McVay in LA and did great things there. Like, I think this is an upgrade at coordinator. I don't even remember who was the coordinator last year in the gap year between Liam Cohen, but clearly it was a guy who wasn't that good since he got fired.
yeah, no,
He had a crazy name. I'm gonna look it up.
definitely blanking on his name right now. I could see his face. I can't think of his name.
It was Josh Grizzard.
Yes. Yes.
Josh
Oh,
Grizzard.
he was not.
He
good
just
for
didn't
them.
do a great job. So like you get a
Granted, everyone was hurt,
yeah,
but
for sure. But you get an upgrade there. Like hopefully some the guys around him are healthy. I think he smashes quarterback 19.
I agree.
I don't know to what extent, but
If he ends up as QB 12, you've got a major return on
Yeah,
investment.
100%.
Like you got a major return on investment for that. So
he's
it's,
free. Like
Exactly.
he's definitely my favorite late round quarterback.
I
100%.
can totally understand that. And he's not my favorite, but he's right up there. And I talked about the other
Yeah.
one. So it's like those are the two guys that like I am gunning for if I'm waiting on quarterbacks. So
Yeah, 100%. Those are quarterbacks that we are drafting as much as we can this summer. We're here, man. Like this is August. This
Draft
is the thick
season.
of draft season. You guys are seeing this actually today as we record. It's Tuesday. You guys got a whole lineup of videos for this week. The 101 perfect draft strategy went out yesterday. Rest of the week, you get how to draft from the 102. Quarterbacks we're not drafting, how to draft from the 103. And then next week, you get the 104 through the 106 and running backs that we are drafting and that we are avoiding. Ton of content on the BallGame Fantasy channel. I'm sure you guys are doing your mock drafts. Make sure you guys sign up for our Discord and link down below.
Yes.
If you want to draft with us, some of those perfect drafts that we're doing, we are going to have, real people in there from our Discord, just so we have some variance, so we see what actual draft boards look like with real people. Also, it's just fun to draft with you guys who, cheer us on and appreciate us.
So
So
tons of love. And
want to
if-
get you guys involved.
If we haven't given you enough ballgame content here, there's a million other channels that you could go check out, such as the Ballgame Podcast, Ballgame Triv, even the We're So Back podcast. Give them a watch too.
Yep.
So
much ball game content. Also in the Discord too. If you guys are doing any real drafts, like send your teams to us. We'll, give some feedback. I'm
Yes.
pretty active in the Discord.
Yes.
I try to answer as much as possible. So any teams you guys draft, if you want us to review them, talk about trades, whatever it is fantasy related, we have a whole section in our Discord for fantasy stuff. So definitely go check that out. And with that,
ballgame.